Yes, I want today's topic to be continuing looking at authority, in particular what I call our authority story. I'd like to say, and then you and I clear about it, Mary, that the next two sessions, that's Wednesday and Sunday, will be about the difference between the conscious and the unconscious contribution. I'll try and I'll try and come up with some snazzy titles for them, because the difference between the conscious contribution and the unconscious contribution, just the words are a bit dour, okay? But if the title was, you don't know it, but you might be at your best when you think you're not. That might be a better title. But coming into the, and that will relate to the authority story, because I think if we see in the group here, is probably a group that wants to go into further Pelham training. And the aim, I don't say this enough, but the aims of Pelham work are quite, I always state them as learning to get needs met and learning to make the contributions and find the purpose that give our life meaning. So needs on the one hand, our personal life, our relationship, and on the other hand, our work and our contribution. And our purpose. So that's sort of what Pelham's all about. And the bit, pardon me, authority is I presented, the broad brush definition, sort of it's our work. And then we have the equation, with the aim of authority is to give us recognition and satisfaction. To have authority, it's got to be recognized. That's usually the title and the pay we get from work. And so we got those, and we don't have the authority if we're not carrying out the responsibility of the authority. So, as the opportunity for me today, is teaching it to people who are into it. But we do have the simple statement that authority is our work, and if we don't have authority because we don't have work, that's difficult. And to be looked at and to use authority as a tool so we can get authority even if we can't get work. I presented a bit flat and straightforward at first, because I'm not particularly attracted to, well, you know, and it's come up in these discussions, and you might well have felt my slight sort of resistance to it. Well, can authority be internal? Can authority be my belief in myself? And of course, part of it can be, but I think in the big wide world, to initially teach it from that place, from my point of view, is sort of copying out on the clear reality that some people are given opportunities for authority, work, training, titles, salaries, property, and the same cycle for their kids, generation to generation. People who have a good hunk of authority in the world make sure their kids do too. So generation to generation, we create an unequal society, and of course at times, as in the case in America right now, it's completely out of hand, completely out of control. And it seems very clear that even the COVID crisis is making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Hello? I mean, come on, what are we doing? So, coming from that sort of stance of the inequality of opportunities to achieve authority in almost all societies, I want to come in with a rather hard definition of authority. It is an socially accepted force. It is work. It is that which will be paid for. And if you are setting up, and partly I want to have it that strong, because if you are setting up a system with the opportunities to achieve some semblance of equality and authority is not there, well, face it, because we're saying authority is that which gives people a sense of well-being in their life. And without it, people don't have that sense of well-being. Now, that's the front end definition of authority. But, authority is also a reputation. This is where we get into the more subtle elements of it. The authority in Pelham is the people who recognize it, the people who come to our programs, until we turn out. But I believe there's also an authority in Pelham in our credo, in the fact that we achieve a great deal of safety. And not only do we achieve a great deal of safety, the first priority. I've been writing a lot about that lately because I want to, in the Pelham online training, which I'm launching in January, I want that opportunity to lay down the credo and, how we're concerned about safety and how that comes first. And this is where it comes into authority story. And it's a bit I've been writing recently. The history of that particular approach of safety. And it's got a long history. It's got a long history. And just to touch on one bit of it, weren't started with Pelham. And this, yeah, this is an example of authority story, okay? Pelham was in Vancouver when David Pelham was alive. And then when I guess, picked up the baton when he died, the beginning times were the late 60s, early 70s. And this was in Vancouver, Canada. And amongst intellectuals, I mean, the word for it is hippie, okay? But I've sort of written it without using that word so far. Professionals and academics, the soft drugs of marijuana and LSD came in like a fashion, came in like a pop band, okay? I mean, everyone was doing it. It was very popular. It came from elites because it started off in Ivy League universities in America. That was LSD. Marijuana, of course, had a longer history. And it just swept in. Everybody was into it, just everybody. I think I've said this previously here. The sole voice for it was David Pelham. But he was a lone voice, and he was a pretty funky guy anyway, so his opinion could be dismissed. And, we were senior professionals and senior academics at the university, so, we're saying it's all right to do this stuff. I sat on the fence for a while, and then I sort of rather quickly jumped down on David's side. But nobody else saw it that way for some months. And then a guy called Jasper Nagley, who was a very prominent academic, much loved, lovely man, sociologist, really, really popular with students. And he walked through the plate glass window on the 6th floor of the Vancouver General Hospital and died on an LSD trip. So that was like, oh, that was like, maybe this is not going to be as benign, let alone enhancing of life as people thought. And similar things happened to other places, someone had a bad trip and that ruined their life or killed them. And that's when the doubts started coming in. They took quite a long time to come in. But the Pelham ground rules, which are now in our credo and now embedded in our work in a whole lot of different ways, actually started when I saw in alternative therapy groups people at the same time using drugs, and I thought, no, we cannot do that. So the first ground rule really was the no drink, no drugs, and that was not popular. People wanted to be able to go to a groovy therapy group and get high. Not a good idea. Of course, that's a long time ago, and therapeutic circles are more concerned with their own reputation. It was a time of great experimentation. That was the other side of it. The drug danger and the lack of safety was really the coat of negative around the positive of a whole lot of revolutionary and innovative change in the therapeutic field. So I guess I'm presenting that that's part of our authority story. The fact that we have this history of, wonderful history in terms of safety. And we have the reputation for it. That's got its own story.
Peter?
Yeah.
I have a thought about authority and safety, and it's something I've been struggling with since I heard about the concept of authority. Is yes, we have to be really straightforward about the difference in opportunity for authority. At the same time, on the principle of not taking away something unless you're giving something back, and I've missed a couple sessions, so it's very possible you covered this in them. I feel pretty anxious about telling people who simply not only don't have work, but cannot work for pay, that they cannot be mentally well.
Mm. I think that's right, and I think that's where I sort of, just putting the background in, not the answer to the question, but we've only got a little bit of the truth, and all there are is tools. And I think you've nailed it there, absolutely. And that is a sort of weakness in the presentation, and I think something you can, and particularly over time, can add, that it has to be maybe right at the beginning, okay? It's like language, the importance of language. And right at the beginning, it has to be maybe leading off with, there are a number of different ways to get authority, but do pursue it. We encourage people to pursue it. I mean, and that was a development out of, how do you recognize people who haven't got the ordinary ways of getting recognition? So I guess my thinking around the two strands hasn't sufficiently come in to my thinking around authority. And I think you're right, it's just got to be absolutely upfront. It's got to be redefined, okay?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say, I'm really glad you brought that up, Elizabeth. I think that the thing about recognizing what's happening in the real world, especially with our place on the truth line being slightly left of center, is that it's really important to acknowledge the container that authorities decided in. And the container is the thing you mentioned about inequality, and the people that have the opportunity to get more and the people that don't don't have the opportunities. But there's also the way that the current, still patriarchal, still sexist, still lots of racial injustice, decides how to apportion worth. So one of the things I got excited about and was talking to Cynthia and Elizabeth about outside of a forum was that in talking about the community strand as well as the official strand, one's recognizing areas of life when society was organized differently, where for example, being a mother would have had some authority in and of itself. It was a socially recognized effort in a less hierarchical, less patriarchal society. So lots of things in the community strand that we can point to now, and the history of the community strand, like wise women and things, I believe there was a time when there wasn't such a clear division between official and unofficial, and anyway, sorry, I'm probably getting a bit rambly now, but I just think that it's really wonderful the way Pelin addresses, in inverted commas, the real world that people are living in. But then there is this bigger container, which is it's a world with a lot of faults, and one of the faults is, you know, if you've got advantage to begin with, and you can not game the system in that sense of cheating it, but just use the system to get authority, like I could, because in the end, because of having middle class opportunities and privilege. It's just all the unseen people, isn't it, that somehow have to come into, because we can think about things in a complex enough way, in a political way, to bring in all the unseen people and fight for them, like fighting for the foster carers. Sorry, I think that was a bit all over the place, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
I think it's really, including myself, but I would like to promise not to exploit it. Okay, but I think I think we need to be able to be all over the place. Okay, we need to be able to present unformed thoughts. As I said, I don't use that. Therefore, I'll go off on one too frequently. Yeah.
I think Cynthia's got her hand up.
Yeah, Cynthia.
Oh, I could have waited, but no, I just wanted to make sure I was in the line somewhere. But I guess since I'm talking, I think that one of the things, and I know not everybody's into it, and I know, but authority, and it's happened a lot with this concepts, and maps perfectly in a concept that I use all the time in astrology, which is a 10th house, and it's almost exactly the same, which is kind of interesting because it's so many things that I know anyways, but there's other parts in terms of being well, the two of them that we don't really, that tend to be more related to women, are actually, even as women are getting more opportunities in authority in the thing, but the authority of women has been taken away from society in terms of, even more so, in terms of the home, taking care of the home, and also supporting a partner. Those are other two concepts that are very strong and that give people strength in terms of contribution, and they're all considered part of the same. I mean, aside from the two that, your own personal, how you come across, and also your authority in the world, your career, your standing, your reputation. But there's also two other areas that give people a lot of strength, and that is having home, which also includes land. I mean, there was, 100 years ago, most people, not just women, worked in the home, men were in the home. I mean, men, women, they both worked their farm. I mean, unless you lived in the city. I mean, and that had an authority in and of itself. Also being support to a partner, now it's treated like, oh, you're codependent, but there was actually, and I still think there is, and I think it's sad that it's been taken away. Having a supportive partner is a contribution. If you're, and like housewife is like now looked down upon, but there was a value to what a housewife did. And I think that I don't know how that relates, but I was thinking of those things as sort of alternatives to the official authority. I mean, it's also the community strand is one thing, but this is also much more. It's not necessarily in the community. It's, taking care of your house and raising a child, having land, taking care of your land, farming, all that stuff.
Mm.
Those are all not necessarily officially recognized, but they're valuable contributions.
Mm.
So I don't know, those are just some thoughts I was having as you were
No,
talking.
I think that, I think it's crucial. And there is the expression, isn't there? The farm has been in the family for 4 generations. I mean, that's authority. And there is that expression, and there is that, you know, the farm had been in the family. It's not, well, who owns it and how's that divvied up? I mean, that, I know that comes down too, and etc. But I mean, the points that are being raised here, I think is sort of gold for us, because, you know, I speculate about going back in time, as you know. But if we speculate going ahead, because my former, authority story, my only university degree is in economics. I didn't, you know, do the other stuff from a university point of view side. You know, and I wasn't a bad economist. But from that point of view, where are the jobs going to be in 30, 40, 50 years' time? I mean, and who's looking at where are the jobs going to be? And, you know, we sort of automatically take into account you can take money out of a machine that sits in a wall. You can check out your groceries on a machine and pay the machine. You know, now there are robots that clean the floors, robots that manufacture cars. Where are the jobs going to be? And that, if we take it from that point of view, okay, we've got this concept of authority, but perhaps because of but maybe it's becoming a real hot potato, okay? Like, but you know, we gotta have a better look at it. I'm starting off what Elizabeth said, what you're saying, Cynthia. Yeah, we got to have a different look at it. And even someone like me, you know, we're gonna live longer, and I still want to work, and I still want to be able to claim my authority. And I guess I want to claim my authority in the community strand, as we call it, or an informal way as society might call it. And you know, how do the Pelham concepts fit around that world? Mary.
Well, I just wanted to contribute something from, I went to a fostering summit, an online conference presentation thing that was organized by a lady called Nasha, who's head of an independent fostering agency that she founded 24 years ago. And listening to some of those foster carers, and indeed there was one session that was 2 care leavers, one of whom has been with a Banya family since he was 9 years old and now just become employed as on their social media team as a 22-year-old who still lives with that family. And the other care leaver, I don't think she'd been with the Banya family. I'm not quite sure whether she was with the Banya family, but they had an authority as people who've been through the foster system and are really contributing. And the foster carers were like, telling stories of how much love and growth and acceptance they gave to their children. As well, people won't know this, and I only know it from studying a bit, Peter and Nikki will, because working with Banya, but what I didn't know till I started looking into fostering and its relationship to the state is that a foster carer often has to ask the birth parent if the foster child can have a haircut, or if the foster child can go here. I mean, like an absurd level of bureaucracy about it, which sometimes, anyway, I won't go off in a digression. The point was that they were overflowing with this amazing contribution of love, for which in the general world of authority, before we started talking about the community strand, they got like this much recognition for, you know. And it just seems very crucial to me. This, even if it's only some people saying it, like us and some other people that might come in on it with us, it's like, it's so important for the future of everybody, that the point Peter just raised, that the idea of authority is not tied up only in work that's officially recognized due to societal privilege and qualifications. It's going to, the world's going to go to pieces unless there's some redefining. And if for now it's only a small group of us, that's okay. A lot of things in society have changed with a small group of people over time.
Yeah, well, sorry.
No, I got overexcited. I want you to respond to this first.
Oh, no, that's okay. Now you go first. I'll hold on to what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about this and this community strand, and also, you know, what contribution will humans be making when 99% of humanity doesn't need to provide the world with food, clothing, and shelter. A couple of things I've been doing lately that I don't know that I would call this authority, but it seems related, and please tell me what you think. So during the pandemic, I ended up getting into watching Twitch streamers. And they started out just as people who were streaming the video games they were playing live for other people to watch, but now it's kind of anything and everything.
What are they called?
And the platform is called Twitch.
Twitch.
And the people are called streamers because what they're doing is they're doing it live on camera.
Okay, that's what a streamer is. Doing it live on camera, right.
And the thing that makes it different from television is that the audience is also a participant because they're chatting to the streamer and the streamer responds. If you don't respond, you don't have a very good stream and people don't stick around. And I've been in the audience of these cooking streamers, and I have knowledge and experience with cooking that is well above average for my age. And these streamers are starting to rely on me when I'm there to make suggestions watch the pot that they're not watching because the camera's on it, but they're doing something else.
Okay.
Make sure they remember the onions. And the way they greet me when I show up in the chat is starting to change from how they greet everybody. And that weird sort of parasocial interchange that has this very ephemeral existence is starting to get more important than any of us could have imagined 20 years ago. And the other thing is I have a number of people who are very interested in projects for role-playing games that I'm working on that are very unlikely to ever earn a dime, but there's a contribution and there's a responsibility, and there are people who are waiting on that. And so it's none of it's authority, really, but it's all sort of this weird proto setup for things that didn't exist 20 years ago, and I think are about to become much more important than they were. And I don't know if I'm expressing it well. I don't know what you think, but it's the thought I had.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's terrific stuff.
This is Cease, can I say something?
Yes, please.
What I hear is that you're doing coaching, and that is definitely an authority thing. You're coaching people. So you could be, that sounds like a cooking coach. If you're telling them what to do, oh, beware of this, oh, fix this. I mean, that's an authority, I think. That's pretty cool. I don't know that you couldn't make money on that, on like a YouTube channel, if you have that kind of authority. I'm not pushing you to do that, but I'm just saying, if you built this up, started figuring out what works, what doesn't, I think that would be really, I think it's cool what you're doing. It seems a real contribution to them, and they like it. And wow, I like it.
Well, I think there's also, I don't know if I'm reading this into what Elizabeth's saying, but there's also the fact of the Twitch streaming didn't exist and used to be only about watching people play their video games. And I've forgotten the second example you gave. My brain's a bit tired. But both of the things you talked about, or the role-playing games, are things that didn't exist 20 years ago, like you said, and that are where there's recognition inside certain groups, like the people that watch and chat in the Twitch streaming, and the people that are interested in role-playing games, and that those are things that, from the perspective of the world when the world is stable, or the historical moment before all the threat to future jobs, would have seemed like sidelines and not very important. But there's two things I'm trying to get at. One is that inside those groups, there is recognition. So there's a socially accepted force inside that little society, and that those groups of people are going to become way more influential and bigger, because conventional structure of jobs and everything is going to change, and the way people use their time and find purpose and fulfillment and recognition is going to change. So I think, am I reading between your lines, Elizabeth, that some of that was what you were talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you've got it. And I mean, to clarify, role-playing games existed before. The way they're being done, especially since the pandemic, is changing hugely. And that's where I actually have the most opportunity to contribute. Because when it was publish a paper book and get it into stores, that would have been, it was a terribly difficult market to even break even in. And when you can just put it there in new platforms where people are going to find that kind of thing, the reach is much greater.
So, just commenting on that, I think what we can do with Pelham is say, like, feelings of accomplishment is an easy one, but feelings of accomplishment and authority are certainly associated. But with feelings of accomplishment, we can say, hey, you're going to have to get them or you're in trouble. I mean, that's what we say about feelings of accomplishment. Whether you're a teenager or whether you're someone my age, if you're not getting feelings of accomplishment, you're going to go bad or sad.
Don't forget the mad, Peter. That's what happened to
Yeah,
me.
yeah, I knew. Yeah, if you don't get feelings, thank you, Mary. The way I used to say it, you don't get feelings of accomplishment, you go mad, sad, or bad. So the aim is to get feelings of accomplishment. So we need authority to feel our place in the world, to feel a security about our place in the world. So we can define authority as this thing you got to get, right? One way or another. And then one way or another, I think, is the big question. But
Can I just come in with something?
let me just finish this
Yeah,
bit,
sorry.
okay? But I think the challenge to me, in terms of articulating Pelham, is to be saying, in a time when society is becoming increasingly unequal, we cannot stand on the sidelines and have a neutral stance about authority if we are saying that authority helped people to live a secure and fulfilling life. And that without authority, it's almost impossible to live a secure and fulfilling life. That's what we're saying, right? And I think within that, we can't be neutral, and we've got to come up with sort of alternative avenues to authority. There's not just one. And I think we've got that in the, this is just me going on a little bit in terms of my own thinking. We've sort of got that nailed down in both feelings of accomplishment and purpose. I haven't quite got it down in terms of nailed down in terms of authority. And I'm rather attracted to, there are different avenues to authority. Mary.
Well, I wanted to say that one of the things that's supported within Pelham in terms of authority that might not be somewhere else in the world is that, you know, I had a long time not being well. And when I started getting well, and then started developing an official authority, I know I've told this before, but I'm just telling it in this context. I deliberately developed something that could turn into authority about being an advocate for mental health recovery without pharmaceutical drugs as a possibility for some people. And I feel that as well as having a new bit of authority as being a playwright and a performer, that's what my play's about, right? It's a bit of something in the world that's saying, I'm developing my authority as a sick person who got well in this not common way in modern society. And people often say, "Oh, you should really make a book out of it," and things like that, whether I do or don't. And I'm going on podcasts, and I'm talking about Pelin and how I got well without using pharmaceutical drugs and the tool-based method that made that possible and everything. So, and that's what I put on my email signature: advocate for mental health recovery. It's anyone can ask me anytime, what's that in my signature, and I'm going to tell them. So I just think that there are and the whole thing about peer counselors or people in substance abuse who have that history themselves, it's only that it's undervalued. It's not undervalued by the people who receive the service, it's undervalued by the official strand because of threat to authority. But a little voice or a little trickle of water can grow into something much bigger over time. I feel very, very passionate about the community strand and the potential it has for transforming people's sense of well-being and recognition. And what Elizabeth said is heartening to me. It's another. It's like you can feel the incipient authority in what she's saying about those examples. There's this recognition that growing in a context that's outside the official and professional strand. Well, good. It needs a bit of competition. It shouldn't have taken over our field anyway. The medical part of it, I mean. Sorry.
I guess one of the things, Cynthia.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about the things that Elizabeth was saying and just in general. I mean, I think you and David Pellin was teaching me the society was a lot more unified. I mean, right now there are, there's the official community where you can actually do things, but there's a lot of unofficial things going on, like and actually it's a struggle. But I'm wondering if thinking about authority as a tool, because if you have authority, if you have like enough authority or money or something where you can affect your own circumstances, you can buy something if you need it, you can get there's things that you can get, but I think sometimes even just knowing, like what's been helpful for me about this, just especially with what I'm trying to do. And in fact, I would, as an astrologer, I could get a lot more authority a lot quicker if I did silly things. And I have been renting silly things for pay. I'm getting jobs that are less silly, which I'm glad. But like I'm trying to do serious work with philosophy and talking about, the understanding of why things work and that stuff. And it's going to be, I know, and I have to just, well, one, because I'm challenging some of the things that have been going on for decades, but also I know that it's going to be a much slower road. But even knowing that, I think saying, yeah, well, I'm not going to get authority immediately. People aren't going to accept it. I'm going to be doing some threats to authority. But just being able to accept that and saying, okay, well, I'm in a position where I can. My spouse is making it of money right now, and I want to make money eventually, but it's not. I'm not. It's not. There's not the pressure that I have to do that. But I don't know. I had some clear thoughts, but now they're getting muddy. But I think that the other thing, I think the world, besides the tool part, and the world's changed. I mean, there's like a whole bunch of different society. I mean, there's a whole underground of YouTube, like Elizabeth was talking about YouTube, and you can make you could make good money as a creator of YouTube, even doing something silly, like there's some that do these silly songs, and I know they get tons of viewers and they have advertising, and you can make good money with that. I mean, and it's not official authority, but it gets you money, it gets you recognition, it gets you, I mean, so I don't know. I'm just, so I guess I'll stop now because it's not as clear as I wanted, and sorry about that.
Well, no, I don't think that's what I was saying earlier. I don't think here we should worry about clarity. I think we want to find ways that we can, well, it's been a big thing of mine, a huge thing of mine, to make the tools accessible, okay? And accessible to the point where you can teach them to children and young people in care. And I've certainly got an ambition to be able to develop authority so we can teach it to young people. Because children in privileged families, this will be sort of Wednesday's material, they get all that by what we call the unconscious contribution. Daily they get lessons about what authority is and how you develop it. My grandkids get that. It just sort of comes with a nourishing family, feeding their children life skills will help them do well in the future.
Can I just add quickly a little thing to
Yeah.
that? I was always very aware of how watching my mother and my aunt and my great aunt, but I wasn't alive when she did this, the family stories were full of people women in particular, who changed careers in their 30s and 40s to find a more satisfying purpose. And I was very conscious of how much that affected my view of the world. That if you're not happy, you just do something else with your authority and purpose. I think that was a privileged position and quite an unusual
you
one.
said that, because in terms of, there's a story behind it, and I think it'll be too long to tell it. But one of the black commentators, remember named Johnson, he's not as young as some of the others, and he was commenting on a Republican television commercial. And he said, there are two things you don't do. You don't mess with the black church, and you don't mess with the black aunties, okay? And the, younger black women who are on this panel absolutely knew what he was talking about. So in terms of my concept of authority, I've got to get it right, so it's not messing with the black aunties, okay? And I don't in any way mean that patronizing. But, I am a student of the civil rights movement. And if you take it back into the 30s and the 40s, and I mean, talk about, people can see so far because they're standing on the shoulders of giants. Martin Luther King was standing on the shoulders of a lot of giants. And a lot of them were women. And so the way I've been presenting authority doesn't quite get at the political power, which is straight authority of black women who quietly organize the vote. So I think there's sort of finding a way to define authority so it can, well, I guess the challenge, one way to see the challenge is finding a way to define authority in a way that it includes people who have traditionally been excluded. Now, you know, in my field, it's all over the place, and I know now, and it got, and that is people being able to work in the field without the proper registration and licensing, you know, and you know that's been a whole big thing for a long time, a couple of 100 years, but now, like some of you and what you said, Cease, about you know, because of the internet, you can get paid for this stuff. And I understand that there's a whole thing going on in America now of people being able to be what we would call therapists because of coronavirus and simply bypass that other system completely. And of course, it's very underground, but initially, Sigmund Freud was underground. You know, I mean, medical students would be chucked out of medical school if it was known they were studying with Dr. Freud. And the same thing happened to Fritz Perls in Cincinnati, Ohio. You know, and it happened to me. Someone was told if they continued to study with me, they'd be in jeopardy. And they were studying at a very prestigious psychotherapy school. So there is this sort of underground tradition, but I think with things, I think there are a number of things coming in. One is the internet, one is the coronavirus. You know, some of us, I traveled all over the place all the time. You know, Vancouver, Ottawa, you know, the Midwest of America, all over England. And that part of my life has totally, absolutely changed. Absolutely. And my work was associated with the travel. And now the two things, the coronavirus and on the one hand, and the tech stuff on the other, and I guess in terms of authority, I don't know where I am, you know, except it's all different. I know it's all different. I mean, if I jumped on trains and planes the way I used to, my kids would be up in arms. They just would. They, you know, be absolutely up in arms. So what's coming out? We've got to redefine and relocate. Maybe the definitions are pretty good, but I think we've got to relocate and readapt, adjust, course correction.
Can I say something? Because one of the things I was thinking about was the way people used to be able to get authority inside the trade union movement. The way they, I mean, some people still do, obviously, but it's so weakened in both Britain and America. But, you know, I'm young enough, I'm old enough to remember that when I was young, is what I meant to say, that there was a, you know, there was a real sense of power in the working class and pride in how they contribute to the trade union meetings, the trade union movement. And I don't know if there's any possibility of any change in that area. It may be too crushed politically, but I think that I feel like with our part of the truth line being left of center and our interest in the women's movement, civil rights movement and racial injustice and things, that it's really important to pinpoint's not quite the correct word, locate and redefine within our worldview how important those and the aunties you were talking about, how important those ways of contributing and developing authority are, and be a pioneer around it, be a pioneer around claiming authority for people who, you know, not for them, but with them, as they hear about us, you know, reclaiming authority sometimes that was there, like I was just saying about the trade union movement, and that's been lost with political changes. I just think, anyway, that's it.
No, I think that's a really good example, because you're absolutely right. An authority in another place, and I hope to get at it on Wednesday's session, but authority sort of shows in people. It shows in what in another place they call their self-identity. I mean, you know, someone can be down on McDonald's. I happen to like McDonald's, but I understand how people want to be down on it for other reasons. But you look at young people in there who've got their first job, okay, and it sort of glows. I mean, authority, even when the job's not very much, it's still a job. There's a great blues song about that. I lost my job. I lost my job. It's a blues song, and you can just sort of feel it. How do I get a job back? How do I tell my lady I've got a job? And that to me is authority. And you're absolutely right, Mary. You know, and certainly my generation growing up in Australia, yeah, I guess there's something about authority and pride, okay? There's something about authority and pride we've got to get at. Because on the one hand, you've got the trade union movement, and people these days almost have to be a bit apologetic. And once it was light, you had that authority. And whether it's a steel mill in Australia, an assembly line in Detroit, Michigan, or a coal mine in Wales, I mean, people had authority in being in the trade union. Absolutely. And that's gone. But then if you take the one we've got now, Black Lives Matter, and that, again, you can feel the power. And that little girl, you know, saying she's 6 or she might be 7 now, George Floyd's daughter, saying, you know, my daddy's changing the world. I think her first statement was right away. Who knows where she got the statement? She made the statement, my daddy will change the world. And he did within a week. You know, there were Black Lives Matter marches all over the world. I mean, historians are going to, and students of history like me, they're going to have a lot of books about why did that work? But it did, and that's got authority right now. And that's all. And when it started 2-3 years ago, it was really, even the civil rights movement didn't quite want them initially, you know, because they didn't dress up and they looked untidy and they wore jeans with rips in them. And that's not what the civil rights movement was once. So I think authority is something that's visible. Maybe in some ways we need to come from the side of it where we can see it rather than we're sort of theorizing about how it could develop or might develop. But you can just sort of see it. But it's got to be opened up, and he had it. You know, he laid the basis down for the opening up because, you know, he called authority a socially accepted force. But that is accepted, the way he said it, that is accepted by the people you want to be accepted by. And that's certainly with foster carers who I mean, that's a field I know very, very, very well. And they, you know, they can have authority by disdaining the professionals above them, because they're getting recognition from the kids. Then they're getting another sort of recognition from the registering agency, the government agency. America would be the state agency, that recognize them for doing a good job. Sadly, it's not, at times, it's not doing a bad job, and that's just sad. But it's almost, in some ways, they don't care if they don't get recognition from trainers and social workers like me, because they're getting it from somebody else. And I guess if you take it back to the time when there's authority in, yeah, my mother had great authority, and she never worked. But, you know, the recognition she got from neighbors and families, and I mean, informally, she was a sort of counselor, kind of, as Zita was saying, a coach. And I think I got my values from my dad, but my skills came from my mum. My skills to relate to people came from, my skill to be insightful about people came from my mum, not my dad. And yeah, if I think of her and her very happy and fulfilled life, she certainly had, there's no question she had authority. Absolutely. And then how do we bring that into this? I mean, you know, and I don't think any doubt, you know, one congressman in South Carolina, you know, saved Biden's campaign. But he only saved Biden's campaign, I think, because he had the hundreds of thousands of women, experienced organizers, but not sort of employed as organizers, not having what in a more conventional way we'd look at authority. But they got out the vote.
Well, one thing I was thinking about was that because of the power and the power imbalance of the official strand, I tend to hear the word socially accepted force as the whole of society accepted force.
Yeah, yeah.
But in fact, what you're talking about, and perhaps what I was talking about trade unions, which were never really probably very popular with the official society power holders, is it begs the question, well, how big does the social group have to be? What you were saying about your mum. Your mum did have a social group, from what you're saying. She had neighbors and other people she'd helped who recognized her position in that community. So I think that's possibly a productive way for us to think about it, especially in relation to the community strand. Yeah, there has to be a community. Elizabeth's examples were about two communities, but it doesn't have to be society-wide. They've had the power, and that's what they said. We have the right to say something different.
Right, and going back, and I guess this is the authority story that because I think these issues bring up the need for an authority story. You know, I mean, John Lewis is going down so big because he and everybody else, I mean, his own book, which is called Walk with the Wind, and then other books, John Lewis's authority story, both in the official strand and the community strand, was going to be told and presented and no one was going to be able to escape from it, okay, in some way. And I think we need in our field, and that's performance life force, in our field of caring life force, we need to find a way to get our story across. And of course, that's what you do get in AA and Al-Anon. But those of us who are social workers and psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, we sort of tend to tell a bit of it that's our personal authority story in a slightly anecdotal way, not the way, to use the other model, a civil rights story is told. Okay. And I think our stories need to be told because, you know, you get it in theater all the time. You can't go to the theater without reading whether it's the director, the actors, the stagehands. You know, there is a write-up of what their authority story is. You know, being in this play and that one and that one and that one and that one and that one, study with that one. It's there. Every performance in a program, theater program, everyone's authority story is right there. It's a tradition. But as is a little bit, I studied with this one or that one, it doesn't have enough punch in our field, I don't think.
What did you mean about the civil rights authority story? I didn't quite understand that.
Well, the same thing happened with the Holocaust, okay? And I've got my own views on it. But certain people were determined this story is going to be told. It is not going to be lost. We are going to find everybody, okay? And we are going to tell their story. And we're going to do it very well. And that's happened about the Holocaust. It's happened about the American Civil Rights Movement. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant literature around. And I think almost unconsciously, some of the civil rights authors might have picked that up. And copied it. But in terms of the Holocaust, in my view, there's no question, it's historically established. Absolute determination. This story is going to be told, and we, as the Jewish people in America, have a lot of power and control in public, in the book world and in the media world. And you can trace it. Oh, it died down a bit here. So all of a sudden there's Schindler's List, there's something else. The story's going to be told. And that's authority story, you know. I mean, that's authority story, contribution, hurt, purpose, all rolled into one very, very heavily.
It's also an example of what I was saying, because it's the people themselves getting together and deciding that their authority story has to be told and preserved. Yeah. It didn't come from the official strand saying, no. Well, please tell us your stories.
Well, then it changes over, though.
Yeah, then it does change over. I understand that, but I spent the starting out bit.
Yeah, I guess you could, from our point of view, you could say one of the functions of politics is to turn the community strand into the official strand. Because certainly in Australia and in England, in at the end, you know, because Churchill's a great figure, right? Churchill is the great figure. Churchill was defeated in an election before the war ended. The soldiers voted him out of office. So the trade union at that time in England and in Australia was the official strand. And in both places, they created a health service that's the official strand. So, you know, while I'm a great champion of the health NHS, the National Health Service in England, they're going to keep me out. They're not going to recognize me. They want to go with the universities. But those issues are very complicated. The left can become a stultifying official strand. It can. But I think coming from the challenge here, and particularly from you, Elizabeth, yeah, I think we're gonna be rewriting that, or just put in a bit of authority story, okay? Because Dave Pellin, I said he left this loophole, you know, it's who you want to be recognized. But the way he taught it was quite in this, you need to be recognized by what we would call the official strand. But he was talking, as Victor had said, you know, he's talking to young kids who would have been really happy to say, well, I'm developing my authority by going on an LSD trip and finding my inner consciousness, okay? So, I mean, Dave was almost adapting the material to a group of young people who wanted to drop out. And where dropping out meant drugs and crime. So he sort of, you know, swung it back into, no, you've got to go to college, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. You know, it's like socially accepted force, you've got to be accepted by society. And I think that's just an example of how the tools and the material are really adaptable. We can adapt them in those ways.
Time-wise, we should be finishing up.
Nikki, do you want to both finish up and say anything? Was Nikki there? Someone's left. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, what do you mean finish up?
Oh, well, we're doing our final, I'm Peter, I live in Norfolk, ending.
Oh, right. Oh, that kind of finishing up.
And,
yeah.
And anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. No, I don't want to add anything. I've just been listening. Yeah. I'm Nikki in Wimbledon.
Okay.
Sorry, I was late. Okay, thank you.
I'm Peter and I'm in Norfolk and I really like today. Mary?
I'm Mary and I'm in Rosarito Beach, Mexico, and I really enjoyed it too. It gets me very excited thinking about unconventional methods of authority.
Yeah, that's a good phrase. Cease?
Wrote in the chat she had to leave.
Oh, okay. Cynthia?
Cynthia, I'm in Kankakee, and one of the things I did want to say, and just because I've been very sad by the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I was also thinking of her in terms of the whole thing with the authority story, and you know, being a woman who got through law school and got on the Supreme Court, and and you know, changing the, you know, how many when we be sad, how many women we need to be in the court to are satisfied, and until there were 9. So I was thinking of those too as well.
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge that because, well, to be absolutely frank, it hit me so hard that I just had to turn it off. I thought I can't look at the political stuff for a few days. Yeah, it was like, what's that expression that goes around a lot these days? A punch in the gut or something. Felt like that. Yeah. So I appreciate you bringing it up. Okay, for me. Elizabeth, as we're finishing up.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from Eugene, Oregon. And I'm going to have fun on the Pellin Facebook group later, making a recommendation of authority stories you can go watch.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, what a great note to end on. Okay, well, I'll see you Wednesday. I think that material about the difference between conscious and unconscious contribution, I can say that's really exciting. And it does get at some of the issues we're looking at here. You know, how does someone do all these great things and they don't quite know they do those great things? Elizabeth, authority stories to look at. Okie doke. Well, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.